My name is Dr. Chris Jenkins, and I am the CEO of the Orianne Society and the host of the Snake Talk podcast, the podcast where you learn about nature's most feared, maligned, and persecuted animals. I invite you to listen to this conversation, and maybe you'll find that what you perceive as fear is actually rooted in a deep fascination. Welcome to the Snake Talk podcast. We have a good one for you guys today. I have a gentleman with me here that has led a very interesting life, working with a whole variety of reptiles, including snakes in various parts of the world. Today we're talking to Romulus Whitaker, and we are basically going to go through his life, all of these adventures that he's been on and all these interesting species that he's had the opportunity to work with. And he also has a new book that just came out, so I want to highlight that as well and encourage everybody to go out and pick it up. I'm reading it now, and I think everybody will enjoy it. So welcome to the podcast, Rom. How are you doing today?
I'm really well. It's really great talking with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So I like to kind of start my episodes by, going back to the very beginning. And, for people like us, for herpetologists, it's, what we do seems pretty normal. It just becomes almost like a lifestyle, right? But for a lot of people out there in the world, what we do might seem a little strange. So I like to figure out where this interest that to a lot of people is pretty eccentric, where that came from in my guess. And so I'm curious, what was the beginning for you? Were you one of these people that just kind of had it in your genes, and since the day you were born, you were really interested in snakes and other reptiles, or is it something kind of hit you later in life?
It's probably a combination of both, Chris. I definitely have it in my genes. But I lived with my mother and sister in a little village called Hoosick in northern New York State when I was growing up. And at about age 4, I brought home a milk snake and showed it to my mother. And her reaction was, "Wow, how gorgeous." And I keep thinking now, which mother, when a kid brings a snake home, would say it's gorgeous? I mean, I'm sure that was the key point in my life when things changed. And I was already enamored of bugs and everything that little kids like to. And the fact is, she was a mother who encouraged this liking and this interest, which is definitely the beginning of my love affair with snakes.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I hear that some of that from people, but oftentimes, as you might imagine, people's parents and families are not supportive of them bringing home snakes as children. So that's great. So you were in Hoosick, and I know that area well. I grew up in New England, so I know exactly where you're talking about. So you're growing up as a child, and you kind of have this interest, like you said, in insects and snakes and various things in nature. How did it hit you that you didn't have to necessarily be like an insurance salesman or something like that you could, this is potentially something you could incorporate as a career, as a lifestyle? How did that all come together for you?
That, of course, took years and years, and, through sort of many experiences, which I related in the book you mentioned. So I think the professional part of it came when I was in the United States, ostensibly to go to college, which I totally flunked out on. I only lasted a year in college. And then after trying various jobs, I landed a job at the Miami Serpentarium with Bill Haast. And that was the life-changing experience that set me on the right track to what I am today, for sure.
Huh, that's amazing. So you grew up in New York, but correct me if I'm wrong, but you you ended up moving to Asia while you were still in high school, or was it after that?
No, it was before that. I was 8 years old when we came to Bombay. And
Okay.
my stepfather is an Indian, and he set up one of the first motion picture color processing labs in Bombay at the beginning of what's called Bollywood. And this was in the early 50s. So I did my schooling in India, in a wonderful place up in the mountains of South India, surrounded by forest, which totally distracted me from my academics, which this is probably why I flunked college as well. I was just, I did my college at the University of Wyoming, of all places, and fishing and hunting was, that was just total distraction.
Yeah. That's great. So you go to Bombay and you go to school up in the mountains, as you mentioned. So how was that coming from New York? And New York's a diverse place in some ways, but moving to the hills or the mountains in India, I mean, I'm assuming it must have just been just biodiversity wise, just the things you were seeing in nature. What was that transition like from New York to India for you?
Well, as you can imagine, it was just absolutely miraculous for me. It was marvelous that I could get out and wander around and look at stuff that I'd never seen before. The birds, the insects, and of course the snakes. And I managed to catch my first venomous snake. It was a pit viper, without getting nailed by it. And I even found what's called a Russell's viper when I was 13 years old. And that is really the hottest of the hot snakes. I mean, but I had a friend with me who had a butterfly net, and I said, "Give me that net." And I scooped up the Russell's viper with him. So that was the safest thing I could do. I didn't try to pin it or grab it or anything like that. So I lucked out.
So you mentioned the pit viper and the Russell's viper. So do you think your interest in snakes, kind of as they were developing over the years and even later into life, were they a little more focused on the venomous species, or did you kind of have a general interest in all snake species?
Well, I think my interest in snakes was across all species. The venomous snakes, in a way, were a challenge, and just the mystique of venomous snakes, the whole thing attracted me for sure. And from the beginning, when I was small, I started reading about snakes when my mother bought me a book about snakes. So I became the kid who told everybody snakes are nice, and people would look at me as though I was nuts. And they would say, "Well, what about the venomous snakes?" And I said, "Well, they don't want to hurt you." So I was probably a pretty obnoxious little kid. But I definitely had a strong feeling about venomous snakes because they had the bad rap. And I guess I was their great defender, even from the time I was a little kid.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I have a general interest in snakes, but venomous snakes have always been, I've had more of a focus working on those and just kind of an interest. And I think part of it's what you just said, like they need more people kind of speaking for them and standing up for them. But there was also kind of that challenge and excitement. And it sounds like similar to you when you were talking about Wyoming, you mentioned like hunting and fishing, and I do a lot of hunting and fishing, and a lot of venomous snake people I know kind of have similar interests there. There's something a little bit of that adrenaline, those challenges, those goals, and so kind of some interesting parallels. So anyway, so you finish up school in India, and then you come back to the States for college, which you said you were only there for about a year. But so you were up in you said University of Wyoming, which is in Laramie, I guess. Yeah. Did you have any opportunities there? There's some really cool toads right outside of Laramie, but I guess in there you would have been mostly prairie rattlesnakes, and then they have midget faded rattlesnakes to the west. Yeah. But basically what I'm getting at is, did you have much opportunity with your time in Wyoming to kind of get out and explore and see snakes or other wildlife?
I didn't. I actually caught my first rattlesnake up there. And it was just a small one, but it was, a very exciting moment. And, But no, I really didn't have much opportunity, and I didn't know anybody else interested in snakes, so I didn't have any cohorts through who I could depend on or get advice from. So it was a little while later before in fact, it was in the Army when they drafted me and put me in El Paso, Texas, where I got completely inundated with rattlesnakes all around me. So, yeah.
So was the Army before or after Miami?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Going chronologically, it was after the Miami. So, yeah. Talking about Miami. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. So you went straight from Wyoming down to work with Bill in Miami. That was kind of your next step. What was, how did that come about? Like, how did you end up, this kid growing up in New York, in India, out in Wyoming for school, and then you ended up in Miami? How did you end up kind of landing that position? Is it just something you applied for, or had you met him somehow in your travels?
Well, it's an interesting story because when I was in high school in India, 1958 or 59, I wrote a letter to Bill Haast because I saw an article about him in a magazine with pictures and stuff. And I said, wow, this man is my idol. So I wrote him a letter, and he wrote snail mail, of course, in those days, a couple of weeks across the oceans. And he wrote back a very encouraging letter saying, and at the end of it, he says, and please come and visit the Miami Serpentarium when you get to America. And this was my goal to eventually get there. But I was actually a merchant seaman at the time, and I was going to get a ship from Miami back to India. I was by that time done with my so-called college education and all that. So I went down to Miami, and the first thing I had to do, of course, was stop in at the Miami Serpentarium. And I got in there and met the guy at the front desk and stuff like that, and asked him if I could talk to Mr. Haast. And he said, no, he's a very busy man, and he usually doesn't talk to people who visit. And then I wandered around, and I saw Bill Haast extracting venom and heard the whole spiel that Mrs. Haast gave about the Serpentarium and all the work that they do. And on my way out, I mentioned to the guy at the counter that I was very interested in snakes. And he said, well, why don't I ask Mrs. Haast? Because someone has just quit and they really need somebody to take tours around the Serpentarium. And lo and behold, I had a job. It was just one of those amazing coincidences that someone had left literally the day before, and I arrived the next day, and I was hired. So that's how it happened.
What timing. And so at the time you were a merchant seaman, so you just kind of abandoned that job and stayed in Miami.
Yeah, I had 2 years at the Serpentarium, and it was marvelous, absolutely marvelous.
Yeah. Were you able to work with Bill quite a bit? Did you guys become close, or what was that relationship like?
Bill Haast was not a man you could even get him to speak sometimes. I would just watch him and observe and try to get advice from him, but he really wasn't forthcoming. It was just a question of his work ethic was incredible, and it's stuck with me to this day. And even the people who work for me look at me as though I'm nuts because I make them do stuff which to a certain discipline, almost like a military discipline. But it was marvelous, though. It was great working for him.
Yeah. And so what was your role there? You said you started kind of showing people around. I mean, but what were some of the various things you ended up doing there at the Serpentarium?
Well, both Hayward Clamp and I, who was my buddy then, the late Hayward Clamp.
I knew Hayward pretty good. So
yeah.
So I never had him on the podcast. I would have loved to, but I used to go to South Carolina and visit with him.
Yeah, he's a wonderful man. Anyway, we actually nicknamed Mr. Haast God because he would sort of show up suddenly, like we were taking a smoke break or something like that, and his head would appear and say, "Hey, aren't you guys working?" You just seem to know when you are working. But yeah, both of us kind of complained that we couldn't communicate very much with Bill Haast. He was a very quiet man, and it was just the way he worked and what he did is what we copied, and we didn't do much snake handling. After a while, he trusted us enough to let us do venom extractions from water moccasins. He figured, well, if one of his kids gets bitten, he's not going to die anyway. So, but he never let us handle cobras or vipers. But just being there was fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, what a time in history and a place and all of that. So, so how old would you have been, when you were down there working at the Serpentarium?
I was in my early 20s. I think I was 21 or 22. Yeah.
Okay. And so you're working at the Serpentarium, and then what was kind of the next adventure for you? It sounded like it may have been getting drafted, or was that after, later?
No, that was then. I worked in the Serpentarium from 63 to 65. And in mid 65, I got this letter of greetings from the President of the United States. And I thought I could dodge the draft. And I had all these options. Okay, you say you're gay, or you move to Canada or Sweden, or you say you're crazy, or you take LSD and you go up there for a psychiatric test. I mean, all these options were. We used to go to the coffee houses in Coconut Grove in Miami, and we'd sit around and we'd all of the same age group talking about all the options we had. And they would say, no, just say you've got a very bad allergy or your back hurts. So, I mean, there was so many things that you could possibly do, or just go to jail for 3 years. That was the option. I said, wow, what the hell? These are not really options. So I had to just go with the flow, so to speak, and got drafted.
Gotcha. So you went over to Vietnam. We don't need to get into any details there, but
I didn't go to Vietnam. I became a medical lab technician, and I spent most of my time in El Paso and then in Japan. So I didn't actually get to see any fighting or anything like that.
Gotcha. So you were in El Paso, and you said it was there you kind of really got to see a lot of rattlesnakes. And so what was it like? I've spent a lot of time in West Texas looking for snakes, and just a beautiful part of the world, and really kind of a unique place from a snake perspective. But any kind of thoughts or stories from your time there in El Paso relative to snakes?
Well, probably the most exciting times I had was I was in touch with Carl Caulfield at the Staten Island Zoo, and he knew I was interested in snakes. I had been corresponding with him, and he was just wonderful about answering my letters. And he said, okay, I want you to go up to the Huachuca Mountains and get me a Willard's rattlesnake for my collection here at the Staten Island Zoo. And he said, I'll give you $50 for it. $50 in 1965 or 66 was a fair amount of money. And it was certainly enough to pay for my gas and whatever trouble I had to go to get up. And to get to the Huachuca Mountains was just one of those, fabulous experiences to get up there and to be able to walk around and catch green rock rattlers and Price's rattlesnakes. And I did find a Willard's rattlesnake, and Arizona mountain king snakes. I mean, what a place. Besides the bear and the deer and everything else there, it was just such a fabulous place.
Yeah, that's a beautiful corner of the country. Willardi is one of the species. I've seen most rattlesnake species in North America, but Willardi is one I've still never been able to see. So, in the wild, but someday maybe we'll see. So you're in El Paso, and it sounds like you spent some time, you said, in Japan as well. So I'm assuming that was in Okinawa.
No, it wasn't. It was at Camp Zama between Yokohama and Tokyo, and I was part of a blood banking team. We were the first we set up a blood bank. We were collecting 5,000 units of blood every month to send to the front lines in Vietnam. And this was apparently the first war that actually had whole blood on the front lines to save lives. And it was an incredible machine that they had set up. We'd go aboard an aircraft carrier at Yokosuka Naval Base, and one of the American aircraft carriers would come in, and there were 5,000 men on board, both Marines and sailors, and the captain would get on the squawk box and say, "Okay, all you guys, I know you want to go ashore for your R&R, but before you do, you're going to give a pint of blood." And we'd set up, and we'd collect that blood in 24 hours. We'd work double shifts and collect all that blood and send it to Vietnam. It was an incredible operation.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, and doing things to help people must have been a good feeling in some way. So, interesting. So when you were in Japan, did you have many opportunities to kind of get out in nature, either there or in other parts of Japan?
Well, yeah, I actually met a guy by the name of Father Richard Goris. And you might know his name because he's written a book on the amphibians and reptiles of Japan. And he took me out and we went herping for salamanders and frogs at night. And so I did have some opportunity. I also visited the Japan Snake Center where I met Dr. Yoshio Sawai, who later on came to India, and we did a survey of snakebite around India. So I did keep in touch with my herp work via these people.
You mentioned salamanders. Did you have opportunity to get out and see the giant salamanders there?
I tried to. We never did see one, but yeah, I only saw one in the zoo in Prague a couple of years ago. That's the first one I ever saw.
Okay. Yeah, we do quite a bit of work here on on hellbenders, and I've always wanted to get out to Asia to see some of those species. I'm assuming they're in very similar habitats, kind of like riverine, fast, kind of cold water type habitats. Is that accurate?
Yeah, but it was accurate. Invariably, there were rice fields and the streams bifurcating the rice fields. So then that means that in the habitat of the still water in the rice fields, there'd be these small salamanders, and what we never did see the giant.
Okay. And even back then, did you see, obviously the giant salamanders are kind of like revered, and they've become this like symbol or icon in parts of Japan. Was it like that back then, or is that something that's happened more recently?
I don't really know. I know that they were revered, and so already at that time.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So anyways, we're on the salamander sidetrack here, but so you're in Japan, and you're after you finished your tour with the U.S. military, where did you end up going next? Very soon, I still had my heart set on getting home to India, where my brother, sister, and my mother lived in Bombay. And the thing is, I had to earn enough money. I had saved something. I think the army salary wasn't very wasn't very great, and certainly not enough to get me a ship ticket back to India, which was $500. So I wrote to Carl Carfield again saying, "Hey, what snakes do you need?" Because that seemed to be my best possibility of making some money. So he gave me a list, including blacktail rattlesnakes and more willards and more green rocks, and gave me the price list of what he was willing to pay. And I went out to the Huachucas after the army, and I had an old 65 Ford. It wasn't a 65, it was more like a 55 Ford, yeah. And it was an old beat up car, but I did manage to catch enough snakes to make my $500 over a period of several weeks. And that's how I got my ship ticket back to India.
unfortunately, I managed to get nailed by a green rock rattler in between as well. So that kind of set me back a little bit. Then I was catching snakes one-handed with the other hand all bandaged up.
How was that bite?
Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a break to let you know that you can stay connected to the Orianne Society by signing up for our monthly newsletter. Be the first to receive exciting updates on reptile and amphibian conservation, from the latest news and staff blog posts to exclusive announcements like upcoming Snake Talk podcast guests. Go to our website at www.orianne.org and sign up for the newsletter at the bottom of our homepage.
It was a very interesting bite. I was staying with a lady. I stayed in her barn, a lady named Nell Brown, who those who know the Huachucas and who hunted back in those days would readily recognize her name. And she was so sweet. I showed up. I got nailed by this green rock about a 2 or 3 hour hike from her place, and it was extremely painful, obviously. And I managed to bag the snake before I started heading home. But I had already experienced a prairie rattler bite and a water moccasin bites, and I had an allergic reaction to the venom. And I started sneezing at an incredible bout of sneezing, which went on for almost an hour as I was walking along. And suddenly the hair in my crotch and my armpits and my head started itching. So you can sort of visualize this guy walking along, sneezing and scratching his crotch and scratching his head and scratching his armpits. And I'd probably tears streaming out of my eyes. I'd have been probably put away for a crazy man. But anyway, I managed to get back there, and she said, "Look, let's take you to the hospital." And I said, "Look, it's a tiny snake. I'm not, and the swelling's already gone down. The pain has gone down." And luckily, I was toking on marijuana in those days, and that seemed to really ease the pain a little bit. So I didn't tell her that, but she said, "Okay, then instead of sleeping in the barn, I want you to sleep in my guest room." I said, "Okay, that's great." And she gave me a big dinner of a deer steak. And so I went to sleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night to go and take a leak. And when I got up, I couldn't see anything. I was blind, and I fell down. I had no sense of balance or anything. So I sat on the floor just thinking, shit, man, I should have really gone to the hospital, I guess. I mean, something's happening in this neurotoxins or whatever. God knows what's happening. But after about half an hour or so, my eyesight came back, sort of, the way a television sort of warms up. So my vision came back, and I got back into bed and slept till the morning. Woke up, the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and I was back to normal. But it was a pretty scary time.
Sounds like it. It sounds like she ended up treating you pretty good, though, getting that snake bite. You were eating well, you were sleeping in some pretty good digs. And
absolutely. Well,
they're amazing.
I wrote to Findlay Russell at Loma Linda University and about this experience, and he said there could be neurotoxic fractions in that bite. He says, we don't have any records of green rock rattlesnake bites, so your note on it is very interesting. And I actually published it, my first scientific note, in the journal. It was a newsletter of the New York Herpetological Society. So that was 1966. That's when my scientific career started.
I was just going to say they're amazing little snakes. One of my favorite. I have a rock rattlesnake, keep it on my desk at my office. That's from the Davis Mountains, a little east of east of El Paso there. But anyways, so you use your snake hunting skills and earn your ticket back to India. And so heading home to see the family, and you arrive there, and then how do you, probably what you're known best for is, all the work you've done in and around India and the institutions that you put together and all of that. But so you get to India, probably without much, you've got family there. How do you go from, arriving off of the boat, to building this career and lifestyle around, reptiles, in that part of the world?
So how many hours do we have here? Well, it was, again, it's a series of coincidences. When I was at the Serpentarium, I said, okay, I'm going back to India, the land of snakes. And it's a land of snakes, but there's no snake park of any kind there. And this would be my goal, really, set up something like that. So the first thing I did was set up a little venom lab in the outskirts of Bombay, and started selling venom to antivenom producers and to a cancer research institute there. So I was making a bare minimum it was certainly not enough to do anything but subsist on. So at that time, I went down south to the same state where I had done my schooling. I had learned the local language Tamil down there. And I met this tribe of people called the Irlas, and they were catching snakes for the skin industry. Literally millions of snakes were being caught and skinned and sent to Germany, France, Italy, United States for making handbags and shoes and stuff. So
of particular species, or just a wide diversity?
Well, cobras, rat snakes, Russell's vipers, and pythons particularly. In fact, pythons almost got completely wiped out because they were the most expensive skin in the market in those days. So meeting those Irlas was at the same time. Now we're talking about already in the mid-70s, the skin industry got closed down by the government of India. And I was saying, thank goodness for that, because they were just getting slaughtered without any effort to look at sustainability of any kind. But that meant that my Irla friends were out of a job, and they were literally starving. And what would they do? So I converted my little venom lab into something that they could do. I mean, I figured I can make money doing something else. But we set up something called the Irla Snake Catchers Cooperative in 1978. And that meant that they caught snakes like they used to. They're incredible at finding snakes. They really are. And they would catch the snakes, bring them back to a serpentarium, extract the venom, and then release the snakes after 4 weeks back to the wild. So it seemed like an ideal operation, both from their standpoint as well as for the supply of enough venom to the antivenom people, because the antivenom people have to make nearly 2 million vials of antivenom every year for India, and they need a lot of venom. I'm very happy to say that even to this day, almost 50 years later, the Irlas are still the primary suppliers of venom for antivenom production. So it's really worked out very well.
That's great. And you played a critical role in starting that.
Teaching them how to extract venom and sort of meeting with the government. Getting through the bureaucracy in India is, quite a stiff operation, man. You have to be patient and forceful at the same time. But we did manage to do it, and. You see, they thought the Irlas were, the Forest Department in particular was against it because they felt the Irlas were poachers. And so how are you going to give poachers a legitimate job? So it took quite a bit of convincing, but it worked, and it still works.
Yeah. That's great. Amazing. I'm assuming in India, certainly I would think the most significant bite encountered would be Russell's vipers, but does that also account for a large number of the venomous bites, or is there kind of a whole variety of species?
We call the four species the big four, and Russell's viper tops the list, and then the spectacled cobra, the crate, the common crate, and then the saw-scale viper. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is, the antivenom, which is made for those four species, doesn't necessarily cover the other 8 species of crates and the other 3 species of cobras. So, a lot is being done now to try to solve this problem. Venom production centers are being set up in different parts of the country to deal with it.
Huh.
But I don't know if you know, but as many as 58,000 people are killed every year by snakes in India. And that's...
Yeah, I know it's one of the highest in the world. I knew that.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that exact number. So the crates, I know very little about the ecology of crates, but I think of them as more of like an aquatic species that comes terrestrial at times. But if they're one of the top species for snake bites, they must be a real terrestrial species that's coming into people's homes and villages and all of that.
They are.
Okay.
They are. They're terrestrial and rodent eaters and totally nocturnal, strictly nocturnal. And they have this propensity to come into people's houses. And in village India, many people can't afford a bed and traditionally sleep on the floor. Or if it's a hot day, a hot night, they'll sleep outside on the ground without a mosquito net. And lots of bites, maybe even thousands of bites, happen to people while they're asleep. Why? How? We still can't figure it out. Someone would typically say, no, the person rolls over on the snake and gets bitten. But that's not true. The snakes it looks like it's some sort of an olfactory thing. They're coming in and smelling the person's body and finger or hand. And it's perhaps smells edible, perhaps smells enough like a rat. And the heat of the person's body makes the snake bite. And we're still trying to figure this out by doing experimentation, but it's formidable when you think of it. I mean, it's a family's can't afford even to have a bed or a mosquito net and sleeps on the ground, where their crates are pretty common, and they come in to search for the rodents that they eat, house mice and stuff like that, and they bite people, lots and lots of people.
How to talk a little bit about kind of those dynamics, like the Russell vipers, and why is it that they end up being kind of the top in terms of number of snake bites? Is there another big overlap with humans, either in their houses or in fields, or how does Russell's viper end up being kind of at the top?
It's at the top for several reasons. Along with cobras and Russell's vipers are attracted to agricultural fields because of the rodents. If you look at the number of rodents in the forest, it's an infinitesimal amount compared to the number of rodents in and around rice fields, wheat fields, peanut fields. And with this kind of prey base, you've got an incredible number of absolutely uncanny number of snakes because of that prey base. And Russell's vipers tend to hide and hunker down when someone comes close. A cobra, on the other hand, is more active, and if it feels the vibration or sees the shadow of someone coming close, will zip out of the way. The Russell's viper is more likely to hunker down and bunch up, very much like a rattlesnake might, and being unseen, and very often at night, someone will be walking along without a light, without a torch, and step on the snake. And of course, the snake will react either by biting or, it might want to try to get away, but if it's stepped upon properly, it's very likely to bite. Gotcha. That's where most of the bites happen.
So I'm assuming most of the bites happen, but also most of the deaths due to snake bite in India are from Russell's. Is that similar?
It seems to be true. We're trying to sort out all the statistics, which is very difficult to get because of these 58,000 people who die from snake bite, a vast majority of them are dying outside of the hospital. So there's no recorded data on it. So we're trying very hard to get more accurate data. I'm a co-author of something called the Million Death Study. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's a very interesting study done by the Global Health Center at the University of Toronto in Canada, along with the Registrar General of India. And it's based on verbal autopsy. This is an unusual term, which basically going from house to house and finding out what the causes of death might have been to household members. And they came up with this figure. Then the government of India statistics were less than 2,000 snakebite deaths per year. The Million Death Study says no, it's 58,000. It just sort of blew everything out of the water. And finding out these statistics makes people in the government much more aware and much more liable to do something in the public health system to sort this out, to make things happen.
Yeah, so you played a pretty important role in the creation of the anti-venom there. You said that covers the 4 kind of top species. How is snakebite treatment and healthcare in general and in much of India? Is that is the anti-venom well distributed? Are healthcare professionals kind of well versed in treating snakebite? I'm sure it varies quite a bit, but what does that look like in India? Is that part of the issue? Is kind of lack of resources and capacity and those types of things?
Yeah, you're hitting the nail right on the head, because the big problem is people have always depended on local healers, and local healers use herbal medicines. They use different kinds of religious chanting, and sort of something called the black stone, which is a little piece of burnt bone, which you're supposed to slice the snake bite and put this little stone on it, and it withdraws the venom. I mean, like in the pre-antivenom days, anywhere in the world, you'd find hundreds or dozens at least of strange little remedies. These things are still very much in vogue in India, and people would likely go to a local healer before they would take the probably long trip to a hospital. And, the healer works successfully very often because snake bites are not always fatal anyway. In fact, a small percentage of them are fatal. So he gets this reputation of being the healer, and you go to him and it only costs 50 rupees. If you go to a hospital, it might cost you hundreds. And where's the transport to get to the hospital from a remote village? So there's problems, man. Big problems.
Huh. Interesting. Well, you've also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've also done quite a bit of work in India on crocodilians. Is that right?
Yeah. That's my second love.
Yeah, talk about that. And that's kind of, I've never worked with crocodilians, but if I was to work on another type of reptile, it certainly would be crocodilians. It's probably, again, links to that challenge and adrenaline and all those things. But talk a little bit about how you ended up getting into that and kind of what you developed around crocodilians, science, conservation, whatever it might be.
Okay. Yeah, okay. We didn't talk about the fact that I set up India's first snake park in Madras Snake Park in 1969. And then,
I was gonna get to that, but we can do that first if you want.
Well, yeah, I'll just start with that because I started this little snake park outside of the city of Madras, and it was quite far out, so not very many people came, and we were struggling for cash. And I sold almost everything I had. I had a big stack of vinyl records, for example, which I sold, and all my fishing equipment and everything that I had, just to keep the thing going. But one thing happened which was really remarkable. A very the biggest local newspaper, the Hindu newspaper, sent out a reporter and a photographer, and for a Sunday edition, they made a big splash for the Madras Snake Park. And a few days later, the head of the forest department came out there and said, "Hey, this is a wonderful place, but you need to be closer to the city. Well, how about if we gave you a half acre of land inside a little park inside the city? And that was just magic, because we shifted everything there, to make a long story short. And within a year, we had a new snake park right in the city, which got 1 million visitors the first year. I mean, 1 million people came in there. And although the ticket price was, it's like 10 cents or something like that, still, it was enough to keep us all going. And yeah.
Yeah. And so when you say a snake park, I'm assuming it's a little bit like a serpentarium, meaning, almost like a zoo for snakes.
Yes, it was.
Was it kind of focused on local regional snakes, or was it kind of global in scope? What was the collection like?
It was primarily local snakes, but I had Hayward Clamp sending me boxes from South Carolina with cane-breaks and eastern diamondbacks and an alligator.
Okay.
So,
wow.
yeah. So we had a variety of snakes, one big central pit where we had hundreds of local species of snakes, which was a real attraction. But then we got turtles, tortoises, chameleons, alligators, crocodiles, slowly built up, even water monitor lizards, which are wonderful animals. And so we started getting a whole collection together, and it became very, very popular.
That's great. So, so you weren't collecting venom or anything like that. This was primarily kind of like education, outreach, ecotourism type of venture.
Well, actually, the venom stuff was still going on then. It was prior to this. All happened in the early 70s. So before the Irdala Snake Catchers Cooperative started in 78, we were doing all the venom extraction inside the snake park, which was great too, because people would come there to see the venom extraction. And we did it on Saturdays and Sundays. And that would be, one of those advertised specials that people could come and see. And it was an exciting thing to show people.
Yeah, I bet. And so does the snake park still exist today?
It does. It does. It's still going strong in the city and still a very popular attraction. I'm not anything to do with it. I turned it over to we started a trust, a Madras Snake Park Trust. So I turned it over to those folks, and they're operating it very well.
Excellent. That's great. And so you created the snake park, and then actually the working with the local people and the snake extraction that actually came after that, it sounds like.
Yeah, it did.
And then so didn't you also create, we started talking about crocodilians. Didn't you also create some type of institution for crocodilians in the area as well?
Okay, in a way, we're going a little bit achronological, but at Snake Park, we started keeping a pair of crocodiles, and they started breeding right in a small enclosure. And I thought, wow, they're breeding in captivity. It's fantastic. And in the meantime, the World Wildlife Fund had just started in India. They started in the late 60s. And they gave me a grant because I had been reading about how in the gharial, this long-snouted fish-eating crocodile, the gharial, was going extinct. I had read in some report from the Zoological Survey of India. So I applied to the World Wildlife Fund for some money to do a survey in the northern rivers. And they gave me a grant, and I went with one of my tribal friends, and we covered quite a few of the rivers where gharial used to live. And we found that they had been depleted to the extent there were probably less than 200 gharial left in the wild, which was really the brink of extinction. So since we were breeding crocodiles in captivity already at the snake park, my ex-wife and I decided that we would start a crocodile farm for breeding crocs in captivity. So that's how the whole idea started. And interestingly, we had very little extra funding, but we bought a piece of land on the coast south of the city of Madras and set up the Madras Crocodile Bank. That was in 1976. So it's it's grown by leaps and bounds since then. And we had over 1,000 crocodiles of about 15 different species from different. We decided to make it a world gene bank for crocodile.
Yeah.
So it's become probably one of the most popular attractions now for tourism.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a quick break and tell you that the Oriane Society is dedicated to protecting some of North America's most at-risk species and their habitats, like eastern indigo snakes in the longleaf savannas, eastern hellbenders in the Appalachian highlands, and wood turtles in the great northern forests. Healthy ecosystems depend on these incredible animals, but these landscapes and species need our help to survive. If you care about reptiles, amphibians, and the wild places they call home, visit www.oriane.org to learn more about our work and how you can get involved.
Yeah, so similar to the snake park, people can come and pay admission and see the different crocodilians and shows and all that. And so you said it's a gene bank, so contributing to conservation of species, especially really rare species like the gharial you mentioned. Have you ever been able to kind of plug into other conservation initiatives, either with the snake park or with the croc bank, with say like reintroduction programs with gharials or something else? Is there ever?
Yeah, for sure. The first thing we did was we were looking at the mugger crocodile, the marsh crocodile, which was also greatly depleted, although it had a wide range throughout the country. It was in very low numbers. The fisheries departments hated them. They get caught in nets and scare the fishermen and that sort of stuff. And we tried to argue with them, saying, no, crocodiles are a very important part of the ecosystem and so on. So the forest department gave us permission to collect eggs from the last remaining populations. And we started hatching the babies in captivity and rearing them up and then transferring them to other states all around the country. I think we gave 1,500 crocs, baby mugger, to various states for restocking wild habitats, which, this was great because they were bouncing back. And we did the same with the saltwater crocodiles. I went over to the Andaman Islands and collected saltwater crocodile eggs from there and brought them back and hatched them in captivity for release in some of our coastal habitats for crocodile. So it was a crocodile obsession for many years there.
Were you ever able to do some similar efforts with the gharials, or what's their status these days?
Well, these days it's great because there's most of the northern rivers have been dammed and polluted like anything. The famous Ganges River is very badly polluted in most of the sections. So there's one river called the Chambal, Chambal, the Chambal River, which is still one of the cleanest and intact rivers in North India. And where there were just a couple of hundred in those days, there are now well over 3,000 gharial left. And
amazing.
This is not just, we paid a small role in the beginning, but the government of India has done most of the work to bring the population back to some sort of a normal level. So it's really, we have to pay credit to the government's operation there. Right now, I don't know if you've heard of this gentleman named Jeff Lang. Jeff Lang is one of the world's top croc biologists, and he's the advisor on the Gharial Ecology Project, which is available. A lot of the information is available online about his work. And I didn't mention, but a lot of these stuff that we've done has encouraged young people to join us And so we've got a lot of what we could call graduates from the snake park and the croc bank who are doing fantastic wildlife research around the country. So that's a real good feeling to know that you've encouraged so many Indian wildlife biologists by just giving them an opportunity to have this experience.
Yeah, definitely important contribution. So, did the snake park kind of function in the same way as the croc bank, meaning have that kind of direct interaction with on the ground conservation and snakes, or was that more of just kind of education outreach focus and a venom?
It was more in the education outreach, but we started, like I said earlier, encouraging young people to start doing field research. And so we had several people. One guy by the name of Satish Bhaskar became Mr. Sea Turtle, and he managed to, on foot, cover most of the sea turtle beaches in India. He literally walked thousands of kilometers of coastline and in the islands, in both on the off the east coast and the west coast, looking at the remaining sea turtle beaches and recommending which one should be protected. And another young lady named Vijaya rediscovered something called the forest cane turtle and did groundbreaking work on turtles, looking at the turtle harvesting up in North India and making recommendations for the protection of some of the species. So, I think the main spit-off on that score from the snake park was these people who did such wonderful work in the field. This was the beginning of India's wildlife biologists. There were very few in those days.
It's amazing. What a contribution. So, so all of these things that you're talking about, all these institutions, they were started, 40, 50 years ago. So, I mean, is that kind of what you've done for the bulk of your career since then, is kind of work in association with these institutions and helping them grow and working on these conservation projects and with these other students? Or have you gone from there kind of on other endeavors?
Well, I didn't stop there. I was always obsessed by king cobras. I mean, you can imagine why. Everyone who likes snakes. I mean, he was a super snake.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask you about king cobras because Matt Good's been on the podcast, and I think he was over there for a little while. I don't know if he's working with you. And then also I interviewed a PhD student in India who was basically looking at the genetics of king cobras and, trying to basically delineate, species and, subspecies, taxonomic related things. But anyways, let's tell me all about king cobras. They're one of the coolest snakes on the planet, obviously.
Absolutely. Well, I was enamored of them even when I was in high school, looking always, every time I went to the forest, I'd hear of a sighting and I'd go to that place and try to look and see if I could see one. But no, I never did see one. And then I met an author of hunting books by the name of Kenneth Anderson. He died long ago, but he told me, if you want to see king cobras, go to a place called Agumbe. And I will tell you a little more about my first experience there later, but this place, Agumbe, is incredible because king cobras are almost common there. And one of the reasons for that is that people worship them and would not kill them. And even though they're frightened of them, and they should be, well, I don't know if they should be because, when I told you about the big 4 venomous snakes of India, which cause most of the snake bites, there are definite reasons for that. They're in the rice fields. They're they're either nocturnal and small and cryptic, so they get stepped upon. A king cobra is big. It's diurnal. And if it senses a human being nearby, it's gone fast. It really moves away. It knows how dangerous people are. It's smart enough to know that. So nobody gets bitten by king cobras. And, what was startling to me is I've got friends in Thailand working on similar studies of king cobras, and they did a survey in villages asking people, what is the most dangerous snake and everyone says king cobra. And then they did a survey in all the hospitals and clinics and found out that there were 0 king cobra bites. So the fear is because this is a big, awesome looking snake. That's all, not because it's biting people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned Matt Good, and that's a very important part of this whole story because we wanted to do a radiotelemetry study on king cobras at Agumbe. So the first thing I did was I bought a piece of land, 5 acres of land there, and set up something we call the Agumbe Rainforest Research Station. And it was at the beginning primarily to study king cobras, but now it's in general, it's for rainforest species, just any kind of study that anyone wants to do, birds or mammals or reptiles or amphibians. So to do telemetry, we needed an expert. And who did we find out about? Was Matt Good, of course. He's done radio telemetry in literally hundreds of rattlesnakes. So he knew his stuff. He was a little bit awe-inspired about putting a radio into a 12-foot long adult king cobra. And we had to work out, exactly how much anesthesia we had to give the snake. We had to work everything out from scratch. But he was just a wonderful mentor for us because we knew nothing about telemetry and he knew it all. So we followed 9 snakes over a period of 5 or 6 years. And one snake we followed traveled 100 kilometers in a year. I mean, the idea of a snake having a home range of 20 kilometers and being able to travel 100 kilometers, a snake traveling 100 kilometers, hello? It just doesn't sound possible, but it was very definite.
That's amazing. And king cobras are primarily eat other snakes, correct?
Yeah.
So they're, kind of like we work a lot with indigo snakes here in the southeastern U.S. and another kind of snake-eating snake. And indigo snakes have huge home ranges, not as big as the king cobras. But, these are, when you have a predator that's feeding on predators, just seems like they would range pretty widely to find their prey. But that's fascinating. Any other kind of interesting aspects about king cobra ecology you learned through those years tracking them at the research station?
Well, we knew about their nesting because we had, I don't know if you're aware of this paper done by Leakey and Ionides. They did a paper on king cobra nests in Thailand in 1966, I think it was. And I read about the nesting, and we heard about nests in the Western Ghats where our research station is. But since we were so hung up on king cobras and the local people all knew us and got to know us, they started telling us where king cobras were making their nests. So we got to see the actual activity of a king cobra female gathering leaves and making a huge pile of leaves and laying her eggs inside and then tracking or putting hobo devices inside to record temperature and humidity and stuff like that. So it was all a part of the study on king cobras. The nesting is, the fact that I think the only other snake that makes something of a nest is a python in Australia, but nothing like the king cobra. And it's amazing, almost 4,000 species of snakes in the world, and you got one who makes a pile of leaves. Yeah, it's just totally incredible.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Are they distributed pretty widely across India? I can't remember their distribution off the top of my head.
There's this whole range of hills along the west coast, which we call the Western Ghats, is home. Most of the high rainfall areas have king cobras, and then in the Himalayas, the lower hills of the Himalaya mountains up in the far north. They're up there, and as well as in the northeast, Assam and that area, northeastern India. So yeah, they have a wide range, but unfortunately, people are so frightened that they very often kill them on sight. So we've been doing a lot of making short films about king cobras and about how, well, one argument we use, hey, come on, you guys, everyone should have a king cobra around because they eat cobras and vipers and cranes. They eat the snakes that are killing people. So
Yeah.
people are slightly crazy, but hey, it's a valid argument.
Yeah, it's a little bit of education, that the snake is actually helping them, with the real danger. So
yeah.
Well, that's great. There's really kind of like, just in the conversation we've had so far, there's kind of 4 institutions, if you will, that you've created. Have there been any other things like that in your career that you've created, kind of like research stations or, kind of like the Snake Park or the Croc Bank? Or are those kind of the primary institutions you built over the years?
Well, there's one more, which was exciting because when we set up the Irdala Snake Catchers Cooperative, the women came to my ex-wife and I, and complained that, look, these guys, they're still making money, but very often several of the wives complained that their husbands got this extra money, so they go down to the booze shop and get drunk. So how about creating something for the women? And so my ex-wife in particular took that on, and we set up something called the Irdala Tribal Women's Welfare Society. And that became, you see, the Irdalas also are very much into herbal medicines. And the women are the ones who gather the leaves and the roots of plants, which are medicinally important. So that was one aspect of it. And the other thing is that at that time, in the late 80s, something was set up by the government of India called the National Wasteland Development Board for tree planting of reforestation. So I went up there and met the people up there, and they were very interested in the fact that we had set up a tribal society for women, and they gave us a huge grant. It was 1 million rupees, and in those days, that was the biggest grant we had ever even imagined. And that 1 million rupees was used to plant several million trees by the women. And they knew exactly what to do. They know how to, raise the seedlings and which of the native forest species to use. So that was a really wonderful thing to happen.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's another parallel. Like, so one thing I've done throughout my career is I've created a lot of institutions here in the U.S., mostly nonprofits or kind of wings within nonprofits to achieve the various things I wanted to. But I'm just kind of interested thinking about that. If you look at your life and your career, some people might be happy, say they get a job at a university or institution somewhere, and they kind of spend their entire life, say, studying, doing outreach around a particular species or a group of species. And very few people will go about kind of building institutions or entities that in theory will last beyond their time. And I'm just curious your perspective on that. If you've thought about that approach that you've taken throughout your life, and if there's kind of why did you end up taking that approach instead of just being the guy who kind of hides out and studies crates or king cobras or whatever it might be?
It's a very hard question to answer. I just don't know how it happened, but I followed my gut feeling. Is that the way to say it? Of doing everything that I've done as one thing after the other. I mean, I've just been so lucky with coincidences and having wonderful supportive people. And the excitement that I get out of seeing people getting excited is probably what's kept me going too, because, every organization we've started and people who have joined up particularly young people. They're just this giving them an opportunity to do something which they didn't realize they could do, and sometimes very much against the wishes of their parents, who would prefer that they become engineers or doctors.
Yeah.
I say, no, wildlife is much more interesting. This is much more exciting.
Well, I think it's very commendable and inspiring, because, whether you intentionally did it or it just kind of happened, like what you've done is, you've created all these organizations or institutions that will, someday when you're gone, your impact is going to continue for indefinitely, and the things you care about, it's going to continue long after you're gone. So I think it's quite a legacy that you built, and in a place that didn't have much of that. You were talking about how, many of these things were the first of this type of thing in India. So I just think it's quite commendable and pretty amazing what you've done. So we could keep talking about those things, but we've been going well over an hour now. And I do want to spend a couple minutes talking maybe a little more specifically about your book before we wrap up. So before we go to the book, though, is there any like major thing that you wanted to highlight about kind of your life and career relative to reptiles that you feel like you wanted to mention?
Well, I think you've said it all, and very kindly, given me the credit for doing this stuff. I guess I could get blown away by my ego, saying that I've set up all these wonderful things, but I think I've already said this, but the main sort of thing that I feel that I've achieved is to give the encouragement to other people to continue doing this kind of work, because so many young people come to me, and all I can do is encourage them and get them to join up in one of our organizations. And I don't exactly say it this way, but it's to hell with what your parents like. You follow your heart, follow exactly what you want to do, and keep doing it. So that's the best legacy I can leave.
Well, after this conversation, I'm sure everybody who's listening, is well aware that you've had a interesting and fascinating life. And if they'd like to get some more of the detail, especially of those early years, you have a new book that's come out, and so maybe kind of give everybody the title and just talk a little bit about how the idea for it came, and really just anything you want to mention, to kind of promote the book. And, I would, whatever you're going to say, I'm going to reinforce it, because I do think everybody should get out there and get a copy and learn more about all the details that went into making all these things you've created over time. So anyways, tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah. Okay. The book's title is Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And that sort of, I don't know, typifies my life, different periods of it. This is my early years, of course. I mean, these days we particularly in India, when someone says drugs, and I just say, just say no, and sort of smirk. But it starts out in my northern New York State days, when I was just 4 or 5 years old, catching creatures, including snakes, and that's how my love began for it. And went on to my early years in India, my school years, which takes up several chapters, because we did some pretty weird stuff in school. We made different kinds of bombs and rockets and stuff like that. And I kept a python living under my bed, and I had an air gun. I don't know which school would allow that. This is a boarding school, and I don't think any boarding school would allow that kind of stuff these days. No pets, that kind of stuff. Anyway, I was a lucky boy. Then the book goes on to my purported mission to go to college in America in 1961. I went to the University of Wyoming and spent my time hunting and fishing, as I mentioned. It was just too much fun. And then I realized, hey, I better start learning how to make a living. So I became a traveling salesman for a while. I became a merchant seaman for a while. And then I landed that wonderful job with Bill Haast at the Miami Serpentarium. So there's several chapters about the work that I did with him and the friends that I met, my travels in the Everglades and all over South Florida, catching snakes and alligators, and really enjoying myself and learning a lot, and which set up a lot of the what I needed to achieve my goal in India, to set up India's first snake park. So this is all my formative years, so to speak. So the end of the book is when I'm 24 years old and I come back to India. So volume 2, which my wife and I, Janaki and I, are working on, details how I set up the first snake park and the first crocodile bank, and all the stuff that we've just been talking about. So my volume 1 is quite exciting. I think you'll enjoy it. Just remember, snakes, drugs, and rock and roll. It's available on Amazon or in local bookstores and stuff. But it's got some illustrations in it. And we've put a QR code in there for a whole bunch more illustrations, which couldn't be fit into the book. But
that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, and the QR code for all the rock and roll songs that I lived through, because music is only. Yeah. So please buy it and enjoy it and write to me. I'm at kingcobra@gmail.com, so it's pretty easy to remember my email ID. So if you pick up the book and write to me, I'll definitely answer you.
Yeah, and we'll put a link in the show notes for this episode that will link people to where they can purchase the book, as well as some other places they can find information about you. So, well, that's great. I encourage everybody, again, go out, get a copy of volume 1 so you can be prepared for when volume 2 comes out. So we'll begin to kind of wrap it up here. But before we do, I like to ask all of my guests to tell me a snake story. So, Rom, what is your best snake story?
Okay. Well, since we started talking about king cobras, we didn't get into them very deeply, but let me tell you this story. Okay, the year is 1971. That's a long time ago. And I was a young snake hunter. And I had this feeling that king cobras are very sensitive to metal, to anything that, and any of the vibes, as we used to say, that a human being puts out could mean that you're not going to be able to find one. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to strip down, take my clothes off, take the chain that was around my neck off, didn't wear a watch, and I walked in it with a loincloth, okay, just a loincloth, into the forest. Barefoot, of course, no shoes. With a snake, well, I didn't even have a snake hook, but I had a knapsack on my back with a sleeping bag in it because I was going to sleep out in the forest. So I went to Agube, the place where I was told to find king cobras. And I was walking into the forest, nobody around. It was absolutely desolate. It was wonderful. I had a hornbill feather stuck in my long, straggly hair, so I must have looked quite a sight. And I was walking along this jungle trail, and I saw the tail of a large black snake disappearing into the bushes. And I thought, wow, rat snake, because in that area, rat snakes are jet black. So typical snake hunter fashion, I dove on it and grabbed the tail. A couple of seconds later, I looked up, and towering over me was a hooded snake looking down at me, as if to say, what the hell are you doing, you feeble human being? And there was a deep sort of growling sound coming from the snake. And I had found my first king cobra, but I was in a very vulnerable position. So I let go of the tail. And then I thought to myself, shit, I just let go of the first king cobra I've ever found. So I jumped up and I saw it disappearing into a pile of bushes. And I picked up a stick very conveniently. There was a stick lying on the path. I picked it up, grabbed the tail again, and this king cobra came up out in the leaves and charged at me with its mouth open. So I used the stick to parry it off. Now, this is a long story, but to make it short, I had to figure out, okay, I got to get the knapsack open. I haven't got a snake bag big enough for the snake. It's 10 feet long. And, but I had a sleeping bag. So I'll get into the sleeping bag. Okay, how am I going to do this? I don't even have a snake hook. I got this bloody stick in my hand. So here I am holding the snake tail with one hand, parrying it off with the other hand. It would charge me and then it would turn around and try to get away. Poor snake, really. It was in quite a bit of stress. So when it was heading in the other direction, I got my knapsack off my shoulders and I pulled the sleeping bag out, stretched it out, supported it with a couple of sticks so it made a sort of cave, a nice dark hole for a snake to go into. And this was all done. In retrospect, it's hard to imagine how I did it, but I definitely did it because eventually the snake was getting tired. I was getting tired. Can you imagine the adrenaline, my heart going at about 160? And I turned the snake and got in it, torn the mouth of the sleeping bag, and providentially it just went right inside. And I grabbed it and tied it up and sat back and just let my heart come down from 160 to something normal. But that's I got my first king cobra. So that was the story of my life. In a way, I thought the Maasai warrior, he kills his first lion, and that's, he becomes the warrior. Well, I had become the warrior that day.
Yeah, that's a great story. Love it. Well, Rom, again, really great talking with you. Really just think it's great, all the things you've done to create this legacy, both with these organizations and with the people that you've influenced over the years. So, and just wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thanks to you, Chris. It was great talking with you. Wonderful.
Great. And I wanted to thank the audience and tell everybody to remember snakes are animals too, and it's a privilege to see one in the wild.